Okay, so welcome, Jen. I'm so glad to have you here today. Oh, we're going to laugh today, aren't we? And thank you for joining us on Open Door Stories. This is Jen Clark, and she's one of the members here at the church that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years, and I'm excited for this conversation because you always make me smile. Whenever
I'm good at that.
You are great at it, and so and you have such an interesting story.
That's one word for it.
It is, yeah, but it's a testimony to God's goodness, and that He doesn't let go of people.
And thank God for that, because we couldn't handle it. I'm just saying, we can't handle this life without Him.
I know. So, and His grace too. So
yeah.
So why don't we start by just you telling me a little bit about you, your family, where you were from? I mean, just some basic information.
So, I have three brothers. The first two are quite a bit older than me and Justin. Scott is 13 years older than I am, and Charlie is 15 years older than I am. And then Justin is almost 2 years younger than me.
Oh, okay.
So it's almost like you had one set of two and another set of two, except for the first set when mom and dad got me was going through like high school and late middle school. So they got to restart everything all over again.
That's interesting because I have a brother that's 18 years older, and it's like mom and dad had two families. Because when I was born, he was graduated. He had just graduated, so it's like they had two sets. Because I have a brother that's 3 years older, so me and him grew up together. And then the oldest, Bobby, I always thought of him as an uncle, really, because he's my brother, but I never lived with him. Is it? Do you have a little bit of that sense with siblings that much older than you, or not?
No, I stayed pretty connected to them even when they moved out.
Okay. Oh yeah, they're still stuck around. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think part of it helped keep us together because I'm adopted, and so there was this huge long-term battle to get me. And so that probably, I don't know, kept us maybe more together in each other's lives.
But are you closer to Justin?
Oh no. Very much not so.
No,
we're very different.
Was it a little bit of a rivalry?
I didn't have a sister, but I'm sure siblings just are that way.
Oh yeah, and especially then, growing up.
Justin is into cars and animals and stuff, so his time was spent places where I wasn't. So I don't connect over the cars. I sort of connected over the animals, but not really. You love
your cows?
I love the cows. My dad and my dad's dad really like cows, and so that's the animals.
You name them?
I do, but they have to show me some personality first.
Do you have any named cows currently?
I stopped naming them after I named three of them one of them after you, one of them after Jesse, and one of them after Boris from Jesse. And so when my oldest brother came and took part of the herd, they took those three. I'm like, I'm not naming them anymore if you're going to take them from me.
I had a friend who grew up with, they raised pigs, and they would name them things like pork chop. Bacon.
Yeah. One of my ex-sister-in-laws used to come into the field and be like, and that one is ribeye, and that one is prime rib. And I'm like, no, they're not there yet.
Yeah, it's a little disturbing to think of it that way. Okay, so you have your families, you're adopted. And so tell us a little bit about your journey to faith. Did you come to faith early in life, or when did you actually accept Jesus?
I always grew up in the church because my mom and dad went to church. They were first generation Christians. So that was one of the things that
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. As far as we know.
Okay.
Because it's
close
how
enough.
do you really know anyway?
Right.
That's a different conversation.
But certainly their parents didn't
go to church. I mean, they had values, but values were also taught in the school system back in the day.
Right.
So that's not necessarily them professing faith.
Right.
And so going to church having the Bibles my mom and dad read regularly.
Hmm.
So I had a lot of exposure to it, and I didn't even growing up think that that was like I was really that separated from Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But I had kids have questions, and uh, I ended up talking about questions with pretty much anybody that was my friend. And about 10 and a half, I was in my self-defense classes, and I had one of those friends and her dad, and I was asking them questions because they were, and I was sitting in those really uncomfortable metal folding chairs, and we were talking about it, and it's like, well, just because I go to church doesn't mean that I am. And it's like, but he's always there with us, and he's always with, and like, of course he's there, and I'm connected to him. And they're like, no, not necessarily. If you don't choose him, he doesn't choose you. That's why he went to the cross, right? I mean, you've heard this in church, right? And it's like,
No.
I was going to say something, but I probably shouldn't swear on the internet. It's like, that's not going to happen. And I made a very definite step towards that because
you chose at that moment.
Yeah. And not like because I had to, but it's like, why wouldn't I? Because this is one of the really important people in my life.
Who, Jesus or the instructor?
Jesus,
yeah.
Thank you for making that clarification. And if you don't have those really important people in your life, and like my mom and my dad and Jesus and God the Father, the Holy Spirit, you don't have a whole lot of I don't even know how to say it. I want to say you don't have a lot of good in your life, but you have good in your life. It's just there's another level of living that's available to you.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And it sounds like you already believed, and you had already kind of unconsciously chosen, but you hadn't consciously said, no, I want Jesus until that moment.
Yeah. Part of it, I was talking to somebody recently, and they had made a comment that they kind of wish that they had made a connection like that with Jesus later in life. Because, and I agree with him, because I feel kind of the same way. When you're 10 and you're trying to make, long-term plans, you're like thinking about how do you get out of high school, and you try to make friends, and you try to hang out with nephews and nieces and change their diapers and stuff. You don't look at your life the same way you do as when you're in a teenager or as an adult.
True.
And so it's like, well, did you have doubts? Yeah, but there's some more serious doubts that come in later in life where you can really struggle. And it wasn't even an idea
at that moment. Right.
So yeah, that's my 2 cents worth.
And then and here's because I know a decent amount about your story. Mm-hmm. And so one of those challenges came pretty quick.
Yeah. I had a pretty stressful, negative event with the same person that I made that confession with. And we ended up separating and never reconnecting again.
Yeah.
After that.
Yeah.
Which is good for what it was. And it was also kind of sad.
Yeah.
Because somebody who played a really important part in your life then doesn't get to be a part of your life anymore.
How did this challenge your faith, though?
Oh boy.
Do we need to pause at this point and just talk about some of the things we were talking about right before this? That you're worried about what you say.
Yeah. It's because this is going out on the internet, and not just the church people are going to hear this. I did have some struggles with my faith. And it's sort of like we have ideas about what it means to be a dad from our fathers. And so we get these abstract things like God that we try to live with and try to understand. And what do? We go to somebody, God as our father is probably like our fathers here.
Yeah.
And so when you have an individual that is really connected in a way to that abstract concept, and then that failure happens, then what is God like?
So you're saying the instructor was a father figure, and then he betrayed that relationship, and so you worry about how, and then so that affected how you view God himself.
I would say it more affected the way I thought God would deal with me, because my dad was present in my life.
Yeah.
But he was also. And even though me and him had a good relationship, it still tainted how I thought God looked at me. And almost a year after that, I had spun myself into, let's back up. I didn't really talk to anybody about that event. And I kind of spun myself into this corner where I thought God didn't love me after I was already kind of in his family. And so I'd spun myself into a really dark corner.
Because of what this instructor did to you.
And I then tried to end my life, which obviously God did not allow me to do, because I'm still here.
Because you're still here.
But there are some things that did change, doubts that I didn't know I would have at 10 that I had at 15.
Yeah.
Or 16.
And it really continued for many years, because that, from what I understand, that kind of took you down into a pretty dark valley. Would you say that led you directly to that dark valley?
I had other smaller things, like because I was adopted, and I found out when I was 7, I have these other parents. And even though my mom and dad really loved me, I still, for some reason, thought as a kid, because this is what kids do, if you talk to any psychology people, if these people love me and they're not my parents, then if I act good enough, do good enough, XYZ, whatever the criteria are, then my parents will come back.
Oh, so you were in that, I gotta be a perfect little girl so I can get my other parents back.
Well, not to get them back, but then my parents will love me enough to come back.
Oh, gotcha.
And so I had things like that were kind of, I don't know if you want to call them common issues. Like, it's not abnormal for somebody like that to have that struggle. But they definitely intensified it and kind of broadened it, because now I have 2 different parts of my life that don't seem to be going well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so between the event with the instructor and then some of these just common issues that led you down into, for a long time you didn't walk with Jesus at all, right?
For a long time, it took me several years to figure out Jesus still wanted me.
So what were those years like?
they were normal. I mean, I still went to school. I had a job. I enjoyed time with family, but it was kind of like, I'm not sure why I'm here, and I don't know what to do. I don't have this definite step forward.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, because from 10 to 15, you think God's going to show me this way, and I just have to take the step because he takes steps before me, and I'm just going to follow him, do this thing. Well, now God's not there. I thought God never left me, but I thought God wasn't there, and I'm like, now I have no step to go to.
Right, because he abandoned you.
Yeah, which is not true.
Right, but this is what you felt at the time. Right. So
isn't this going to get hairy? Yeah. We have to be careful how we talk about God, because sometimes we blame him for things that are not his fault.
Right. People do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, talk about the valley as much as you want. And I know you worry about saying things that are, because it's hard to reveal dark things in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I know, but I want to reassure you again that they're not going to judge you. Even though that you think so, they're not. Yeah.
I eventually got out of high school and went to community college. And there I met somebody and presumed to be in a Christian-based faith. And it was a 6-month relationship, and some pretty horrific things happened. And then towards the end, there was a transition out of a Christian-based faith into some pretty wicked stuff.
Yeah.
And I got exposed to that.
In fact,
and
he was involved in occult stuff.
And it was a slow enough transition to kind of just, you gradually turn up the water temperature and you don't really notice how hot it's getting, and you can boil a frog alive.
Right. That whole
sort of
frog
thing.
in the kettle thing.
The whole frog in the kettle thing. And you think that if you can be good enough, the things that you can catch, it's early enough in the process to deter them out of it.
So you were feeling like you could rescue this man from the dark path he was going down. But in the end, he was dragging you with him.
Mm-hmm. And because I loved him and he claimed to love me, there is a lot of power in that.
Mm-hmm.
And separate from God. If you have secular people, one of the most wonderful things is the people that they love and the connection that they have to it.
Right.
And so it's like, if I stay long enough, if I do good enough, if I say the right things, can he come out of this? Can I deter him out of, if it were drugs, can you get him out of the social circles, away from the product, all of that? And I couldn't. And I actually blamed myself a lot for that.
Did you?
Yeah. And I thought to myself, if I had been better, or my life had turned out differently and I was an actually good Christian person, would that have been what was necessary to help him get out of that?
Yeah. Well, and at this point, you didn't think God wanted you.
Yeah, I was in that weird place where it's like, I chose you and you chose me, and then you unchosed me.
So
yeah.
So there's a little bit of the, well, I might as well do this stuff because God doesn't want me anyhow. Is that the case?
I had a decision like that I chose wrongly.
Yeah.
But it didn't take long to figure out that was the wrong decision to make for me anyway.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it helped that I was in a good family and I was in a church most of my life. I think I stopped going to anything but Sundays when I was 15, and I did spend some time outside of churches and church hopping. But there was a good time where I wasn't even in a church.
Mm-hmm.
So I found out through that long, like decade or more long time, that even if God didn't love me back, like who I was, that still wasn't set up for me.
Yeah. So you went through about a decade of just kind of spinning off the rails, going into the wickedness and all of that mess.
I went through community college.
I got a degree.
I went through community college, got that degree, and I always had a job. I've always had one to three jobs, and
so on the outside you look
I look like I can,
like you're put together.
Yeah.
Right? You got a degree. You got a job. Everything's great, but underneath all of that, is just this darkness.
Yes, and it's like I had a guy that I call my ex-fiance. We dated for 14 months.
Is this Chris?
This is Chris.
Okay. So that's after Mitch.
That was after Mitch, yeah.
Before you get there, how did you get out of that relationship with Mitch? Because it got darker and darker and darker. And at some point, I know you went, no.
Yeah, I had 2 or 3 really big events of this is super uncomfortable and I don't want to go through this and I don't get a choice in it. And sometimes that was not just me and Mitch. Sometimes that was, our mutual friend group was involved in 2 of them.
And so they were going and doing things that you were like, no, I'm not doing that.
There's a perception by them that I required help. and help had to be good enough. Now I can't speak. What I thought help was, and what they thought help was, it was more important to do the help that they thought I needed rather than the help I could ask for or I could try to suggest or participate in. And
gotcha.
So yeah,
their help was to get you darker.
And because not all of them they didn't have faiths, a lot of them. So I think that they were trying to do what they thought was right in their eyes.
Right. And
then that would be good enough, even if I didn't accept the help or I didn't take it right or however you want to say it.
So at a certain point you went, I can't do this stuff.
Yeah. The very last event, I actually broke up with him on text message because I was not going back, and I changed my schedules and I changed my arrival times and
all of it. Like you broke it off.
I totally redid how I did the community college thing and to avoid them and him. So yeah.
Have you actually talked to him since?
Limitedly. I think I've had twice where I've had contact with him.
So you got out of that.
I got out of that, and then a month later I got into the relationship with Chris. And that had other bad things go on with it. And I eventually transitioned in my life from the community college to the university. And it was 3 days before I started classes there that me and Chris had a conversation, and I just was like, I'm not doing this. And it's like he didn't believe me at first, and it's like, no, we're done, because I'm not going to be working 2 jobs and going through this with you and be a full-time university student.
Because he was not treating you appropriately.
No. And it's you kind of get used to a new normal.
So you got used to the abuse.
Yeah.
Between Mitch and then Chris, it's like you've just starting really at 15 on, you've just been you got used to being mistreated by men.
Yes.
Over and over and over. So like this is just normal.
Yeah.
And it's caused a struggle for even that you still struggle with. How do you relate properly with men? Because you're like, Because most of them have been jerks, to say it very, very mildly.
Yeah, some of them are words that we can't say on the podcast.
Right. Even though they might be appropriate words for them.
But yeah, from going from not really, things change when you're a child to an adult. And there's just levels of relationship, and those levels of relationship that you learn from having things go wrong and going from like, oh, it's going to work out because it's this vague thing that I haven't experienced yet. And then be like, and then all of these bad things. Then it's like, okay, so this is the reality of what this is. Right.
You just assume that this is what normal is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're not alone with that. I know there's a lot of women who are like at the same time, oh, well, if this is what it is, why do I want that?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And it's like with Chris, it's like, okay, so this is the way that it's really like, and do you figure out you can deal with this, or do you separate and try to figure out if the next person is going to be worse or better? And it's like, I know what he is like, and that kind of feels safer because you know what to expect as far as things relationally. So
I think about that song that we sing, "Love is a Hammer." That I've been in these chains for so long they feel natural.
Yeah.
Sometimes just it's not right, but you're so used to it, it feels comfortable in a weird sense. Yeah. So how did all of this bad interactions, particularly with men, how did that affect your faith journey? Because I know you went for a long time where you didn't think God wanted you, and you kind of walked away a little bit, even though there was always still a little bit there. But so how did it come up? Because that's not where you are now.
No. For a while, after Chris, I had 2 additional suicide attempts, and then I spent 8 years just kind of like, well, if I get into a car accident, it's going to be okay. And I didn't think that God would necessarily let me die if I tried again, but I was still not sure what that stepping stone was I had. So I was just kind of just going through the motions, and as long as I looked like I was doing good, it seemed to work out.
Keep on a good mask on the outside, everything's great, but it's not.
And then I had like 3/4 of the way or 2/3 of the way through university, I kind of spiraled down again. I went to counseling, got some help, and then I continued to work on what I thought I could in varying levels. I eventually did graduate.
Yay.
Took a while. Student loans are not fun.
No.
Took care of those. And things started to make some positive progress in a way I hadn't anticipated about 5 years ago. And then I had another negative event with, because you can only go so long before it comes back to get you, with another guy. And then I just kind of, wherever you take me, I'm going to go. And God just kind of kept me like looking for a church, trying to find connection with him in whatever way that I could. And it did eventually take me to the situation where I did meet you guys
through an email.
And I've been kind of downplayed, but I'm kind of feisty.
Of course you are.
So the email that Pastor Jessy got was pretty specific
Mm-hmm.
and a
You
little bit
expected,
off-putting.
and you expected a complete rejection, which
Mhm.
many churches didn't respond at all, right?
Uh,
Or was it negative
it's,
responses?
I think I had 7 or 8 that I reached out to during COVID or the right before COVID, and I got a response from 3, an initial response from 3. I had one of them that never responded again, and then I was between the 2 people, and I landed here, which was interesting. Going in between in limbo, I'd be like, okay, which one of you is going to drop me first? Because you're gonna find
Oh.
out what I'm really like.
And then you spent a lot of time with Deb Yeager.
Yes, I love Deb.
And you were able to just tell her your whole story, and so tell us a little bit about how that went, and just in terms of how it felt having someone know you and not reject you.
I was just gonna say, it takes a little while even after you tell your story, because you can say it and have somebody for a short time be able to deal with it,
Mm-hmm.
and then find out, they get stressed out and then they
Mm-hmm.
will, it was all a lie after that. It's like, well, you lied to me, this isn't helpful. But then it's like you can breathe.
Being known,
Yeah,
and
being
still
known.
being people still okay
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah. And I'm a kinesthetic person, so I like to like hug people or like, stop it. So like the fact that she was comfortable enough hugging me
After knowing everything.
and it had been a while, and she still is like, no, I really do love you and I don't really care about this stuff. And so then it's all like, well, now I can cry.
Oh.
And not that I hadn't before, but it was a lot easier to cry and make weird, funny comments that make us laugh and just stuff. And it's like, oh, this is kind of like what it's like to, I should have been doing when I was in high school and community college and stuff. And it's like, this is great. I'm never I'm never leaving her. If she moves out of state, I'm going.
Yeah.
Bye, Brian.
But it's you've struggled so long with being abandoned.
Yeah.
That it must have been such a wow, I'm not going to be abandoned here.
It's like they're really going to keep me, and I can really say what I think. And even if you guys don't agree with me, it's still okay. And I had this idea that I was somehow going to contaminate the churches that I went to when I was going through that long period of time. And it's like, I can only contaminate you guys with love. I can't contaminate you guys with evil, dark things or bad things or things that are stressful to you. So, yeah.
Well, we're so glad to have you.
I'm glad. I think I'm happier to have you guys. Just saying.
Well, you're such a bright spot with all the dark stuff you've gone through. You bring so much joy and happiness, and I think sometimes the people who've gone through those stuff really there's an appreciation for Jesus that I don't think people get unless they've gone through it. So
yeah, but not just going through hard stuff, because I had gone through hard stuff throughout that whole time. And there was I had an idea in my head that, even though God knows everything and you're supposed to be honest with him, you still have to treat him with reverence or respect, or, somehow acknowledge, you're not equal to him. And I had a prayer time with him that was not very nice. And there was some good that came out of that, and it wasn't just I was disrespectful to God and he was going to zap me with a lightning bolt like Zeus. He sometimes, if you go through it and you go through it enough, like I think there are layers that you go through in prayer that you can bring what you have, and then you get to experience these little bits, like little kinds. Like
You're doing great. You're doing good.
I can't articulate this.
No, you are. You're articulating it very well.
My diamond dots. It's like one more diamond dot in the painting. And then, if you get a whole block that's this one color and you get it out in this one big prayer, we can just like pave the way there.
Yeah. But you need to get that stuff out. You need to be honest with God. And sometimes that means yelling at him because this really hurts, or you don't understand, or you're frustrated, and just tell him. It's very respectful, actually.
He already knew it anyway.
Exactly.
And there's part of it, like, I'm not saying that everybody should do this, but I swore and like kicked things. So he's big enough to handle that, and he can, and that's probably not the way he wants you to pray to him every time.
But if that's what you're really
feeling, that's
right.
What's really going on inside of you, that it comes out in whatever way you need it to.
Well, and the conversation I had with Beth Diener, which I believe is up already, is, when she lost her son to suicide, she said, there was multiple conversations she had with God that were quite colorful. Because she was very angry and very hurt and didn't understand what was gone. And there's times for that, because life can be really ugly at times and really suck. And he knows, you might as well just tell him. And it's respectful because you're really, you believe that he can handle it, and you're going to someone who can deal with it. So,
and that he wants to.
Yeah. Because our God, our Father, cares you're going through that stuff. He cares about your emotions and your pain. So, So speaking of diamond dots,
yes.
My last question is always, what are some things that you really enjoy, that you just bring you peace, bring you joy, that you just bring a smile to your face? And one of them is diamond dots, right?
And one of them is diamond dots. I do love that. I love in the season that we have our cows. So there is actually a picture in our home of me getting like nose to nose.
Really?
With a cow. Which the cow then bumped her nose on me and decided to run away. I'm like, what gives? We were friends. Come back. And
So you love your cows.
I love my cows. I like your dogs.
Oh, yes.
So I do like animals, and I like being, I have a pond on our property, and then we have, fields around for the cows. So it's kind of a pretty thing. So it's kind of nice to go take a walk out and around and get away from all the electrical buzzing and cell phones and
just be in nature.
And I think we miss that a lot.
Yeah, I agree. So, well, thanks for the conversation.
Yeah.
It's such
no problem.
Was it as scary as you thought?
A little bit in the beginning. I feel much better now.
Yeah, you relaxed after about 5 minutes. You started when I started talking about stuff. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us today. If you have questions for Jen, feel free to ask her or put it in the comments. And thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.